Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another Rise Up webinar. The month is July, and I can't believe that we're already here. I can't believe it's the July Rise Up webinar. They're going by so fast, but that's because there's so many cool people on, so many awesome young change makers and leaders sharing their messages, sharing their voices and passions, and it's just going by so quickly. And this month couldn't be any different. I couldn't be more excited and absolutely honored to introduce the host for this month's webinar. But like always, in the chat, if you are watching, tell us who you are, where you're from, and animal you are most afraid of. That will come into play later in the conversation, the reason why I'm asking the animal you're most afraid of. But thank you so much for taking the time to be with us here this evening. Let's go ahead and get started. So, like always, my name is Bailey Ritter, and I will be the MC for this evening, just kind of steering the conversation and helping really amplify the work that this next group that you'll be hearing from is doing. I'm originally from Pontiac, Illinois. I still live in Illinois, but just right outside of Chicago. And the animal that I'm most afraid of would have to be fish, but when I'm in the water with them. So I had to put that sort of clarifying statement there because I ultimately love fish. I grew up and had aquariums. I worked at an aquarium during college. I love fish. Being in the water with them when it is a bit murky, so lakes, is a bit nerve-wracking. And I realized that I only live around lakes, being in Illinois, and I love swimming in lakes, but yeah, I would have to say fish are the animal that I'm most scared of. But enough about me. Like I said, will be the MC for this evening, but I'm absolutely honored and excited to introduce the host for this month's webinar, the Houston Zoo Teen Leadership Council. I first met Skylar, which you can see him holding a equally scary creature there. I first met Skylar, one of the council members, a couple of months ago when he reached out to me after watching one of the first Rise Up webinars. I think like the actual first Rise Up webinar. And he emailed me the next morning telling me how much he loved watching the webinar, but ultimately that he felt his fellow teen leaders at the Houston Zoo would make perfect hosts because their passion just was so infectious for protecting wildlife and protecting our planet. And I actually went back and read the email Skylar sent me before we started this webinar this evening, and was reminded of why I had just like this gigantic smile on my face when I read his email. It was filled with so much infectious love for both the Houston Zoo and Skylar's fellow team leaders that I just had to meet them. And I as soon as we got off the Zoom, I think it was Zoom, as soon as we got off the Zoom, I knew I needed to learn more about their work and dedication to saving wildlife. So they will explain a little bit more about their spectacular program, but I wanted to give each of the presenters a little introduction before we started. So first up is Sarah Jones. Sarah is a high school student passionate about conservation, environmental awareness, and wildlife, who enjoys art, reading, and keeping her community clean. Same. I think we're long lost twins. That's my bio too. Next is Skylar Nix, who I already introduced. Skylar is a proud Houstonian with a strong passion for wildlife and understanding the way our world works. He takes every chance to grow as an individual as well as to inspire others to take action. And last but not least, on the Teen Leadership Council side of things is Jasmine Maldonado. Jasmine is an ambitious student that loves animals, nature, photography, and much more. She strives to be a good communicator and the best version of herself. And finally, we are down to our awesome and fearless team program supervisor, Colleen Kavanaugh. Colleen, their fearless team program supervisor, like I mentioned, is working to cultivate the next generation of conservation heroes by mentoring teens at the Houston Zoo and helping them connect to nature through adventure programs around Houston and internationally. So like I promised, I'm only acting as MC for this special hour, but I did want to remind everyone that we will have time at the very end for questions, so definitely add them as they come to you in the Q&A box. Please definitely engage with this group. They're so fun and they have so much knowledge about this topic that if anything comes to your mind, I'm sure they would be happy to answer it. So without further ado, I will stop sharing my screen and pass the virtual mic over to the group.
Introduce the Zoo Crew program and our Teen Leadership Council. I'm the Teen Program Supervisor, so I run our Zoo Crew program, but I like to say that this program is really run by the teens because they're just awesome. So the Houston Zoo's Zoo Crew program seeks to inspire teens to problem solve ways to save animals in the wild and empower them to influence others to take action. Zoo Crew is made up of about 200 teens from the greater Houston area, as well as down in Galveston. They come from many miles away to be part of this program. But they have the opportunity to learn about careers in conservation and help support the Houston Zoo's mission, which is connecting communities to animals, inspiring action to save wildlife. They do this through a variety of activities. This includes Naturalist, in which teens engage guests about the zoo's animals through interactive activities as well as storytelling. Camp Mentor, in which teens mentor younger campers in our summer and winter camp programs. Junior Zookeeper, in which teens assist keepers in caring for the animals. And our Teen Leadership Council, which we like to call TLC. This is a council made up of 12 highly motivated teens who lead and mentor their Zoo Crew peers. 3 of our Teen Leadership Council members are joining us today to talk to you about interpretation and how it's used to inspire care and action. So I'm going to turn it over to our Teen Leadership Council for them to take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Colleen. So if my screen will let me go to the next slide. There we go. Okay. So what we're talking about today is interpretation. So it's kind of a long, scary word that you've probably heard about somewhere before, or you probably know what it means to interpret, but what exactly does it mean? So there's many different ways that interpretation is used, and thus a lot of different ways to really to define it. So let's talk about what it's going to mean for us today. Well, interpretation is the best way to explain it is a very unique way to communicate messages and ideas with other people. So in other words, it's really a way of educating people. And one of the 3 ways to communicate messages, and it is one of the 3 ways to communicate messages with people. So the first one is information, and it's basically what it sounds like. So information is facts, it's statistics, it's stuff straight out of a report, maybe what you would read in a textbook. It's information. It's factually correct. It's very unfluffed up, rather boring, but it's just facts. And then the next type is instruction. So instruction is kind of what most of us, I think, are used to, kind of like our classroom style, sit down, more formal education style. If we all think back on our experiences in that kind of style, I'm sure not all of them are positive. We tend to think of that as like a more boring place, but I'm sure we've also had those moments where we've truly loved class. So instruction has its moments, but it prioritizes more so like retention over actually engaging. So it's not a very engaging way to learn. And then lastly, we have interpretation, the most unique and, in my opinion, the most impactful way to communicate and teach people about things. And so the big question, what is interpretation? Well, according to the National Association for Interpretation, interpretation is a mission-based communication process that forges emotional and intellectual connection between the interest of the audience and the meanings inherent in the resource. So what does that mean? It means interpretation is all about connecting with your audience, as well as adapting your information and conveying it in a way that your audience will understand it, trying to make it as engaging and innovative as possible. And so what this means is not only are you passing along information and facts, you're also provoking care within your audience. You're making a connection between your audience and whatever it is you're talking about. And so one of my favorite outcomes of interpreting is that ability to provoke care within someone, that ability to influence the way someone perceives something for the better. It really is an art form of its own, and it's it's really empowering to be able to interact with someone and then see them walk away looking at something differently than before, and making that spark and that newfound care within someone. It's just very amazing to me. So now that we talked a little bit about what interpretation is, let's talk about how one interprets. So I'm going to hand it over to Sarah.
So, just like Skylar was saying, interpretation is a powerful educational tool that connects us emotionally to our cause or our message, that it's not necessarily in front of us, to the audience that we're presenting to that is in front of us. So when we started planning this whole presentation, we were wondering, well, what makes up interpretation? And how can we explain it in a way that like smoothly makes sense to people? So after a long debate and, talking a lot about what interpretation means, this is what we came up with. We have 3 steps, and they are intent, interest, and translation. So basically, what is your purpose with your interpretation? What connection is there between your audience and the message you're trying to send? And lastly, how do you plan to translate your message to your audience? And so now Skylar is going to talk about how we use this whole process in Zoo Crew.
So one of the parts of our program that I think best follows kind of like that 3-stage process is what we call storytelling. And so storytelling is what you think it is. It's about telling stories. So it's all about sharing the stories of our animals at the zoo to our guests. And so not only are we answering questions like, what do our elephants eat? Where do they live in the wild? How old are they? We're really building connections between our guests and our animals by sharing like personal information. So personalities of our animals, their family structures, what their names are they sassy? What are their personalities like? Do they like certain things, dislike certain things? All in hopes of provoking care and inspiring our guests to take action to save animals in the wild. So with that said, I would like to introduce you to Jonah. So he is one of our 5 California sea lions at the Houston Zoo. And so what we're going to do is, as we go through this process of talking about how does one interpret something to another, we're going to use those same steps and interpret Jonah as if we were at the zoo talking to guests, and share his story. And so let's go ahead and start off with the first step, and I'll hand it over to Jasmine.
So the first step is interpretation. Whenever we're talking about interpretation, we need to define our intent. You could think of this as what you intend the outcome to be. Intent can be seen as a goal of what you want your listener to do or take away from what you are telling them. Intent is something that needs to be established before anything happens. You could look at intent as the foundation of this process.
Awesome.
Now you have to define your goal. When defining goals, you need to be clear. Your goal could be what you want your listeners to take away or what type of tone you want to use when you speak to them. When you set a goal, the rest of the communication process can go smoothly. If you somehow get mixed up or get distracted, you can always remember your intention and continue on the conversation. When you set a goal, you can clearly see what you are trying to accomplish.
Okay, so like Jasmine said, intent is all about setting your goal for yourself and really what you're trying to do when you're interacting with someone. So back to Jonah and back to the zoo. At the Houston Zoo, our mission is to connect communities with animals, inspiring action to save wildlife. So that is really our underlying intent with everything we do. So that also is our intent in storytelling. So with every interaction, our goal is really to inspire our guests to make change in their lifestyles and take action themselves as individuals to save animals in the wild. So how does that adapt to when I'm storytelling with Jonah at the zoo? Well, if I was wanting some sort of call to action, so like how our mission statement is, if I want someone to do something when I'm talking to them, I need to really ask myself what that's going to look like. So you want to be realistic. So though I'd love everyone to fly out to California, pick up a career in sea lion conservation in California, and dedicate their life to saving sea lions directly, that's not very realistic. So that can't really be what I am expecting my audience to do. That can't really be my goal. So what if I expect something else? What about behavior change? Well, we all know at this point, I'd like to think, that plastics have a negative effect on marine life, especially sea lions. So how would I want that to look? If I want someone to change something in their lives to, like around plastic, how would I set myself up for success right now? Well, one of the biggest types of plastic that's also one of the biggest types to easily cut out of your lifestyle is single-use plastic. So I'm sure we've all heard a lot about that. So like straws, forks, spoons, plastic wrappers, candy wrappers, food wrappers, so stuff like that. If I want someone to stop using that, how do I define that as my intent? So how do I make that feasible for someone? Because you really are, in a way, it's like you're presenting to someone, like it's a persuasive essay, really. It's a persuasive essay, but like verbally. So how do I convey that to someone? So it's really important to do that work in the beginning and figure out how to minimize that inconvenience for whatever you're wanting your audience to do. Because if something's inconvenient, how can I expect someone to do it? So one thing that I know is reusable items are really widely available. They're really cheap and they're really easy to find. And there's so many different types of them. So by doing that work in the beginning and asking myself these questions and really refining my intent, I can set myself up for success to the best of my ability right now. So our intent, or my intent with Storytelling with Jonah, would be to inspire zoo guests to use reusable items to save sea lions in the wild, thus reducing their plastic consumption and their impacts on our ocean habitats. So like I said, really asking yourself those questions and thinking that process through of how you can set yourself up for success is really important in starting out this process. So now on to the next.
Right. So now with that said, we're going to talk about our second step, which is interest. And interest is all about getting to know your audience. And sometimes this is difficult because if at the zoo and you're talking to someone that's approaching you, you don't always necessarily know them and they're strangers, but you have to find a way to understand your audience with saying few words to them beforehand. So when you're thinking of the interest of your audience, the first thing that it's important to understand is your age group. So if you have kids or adults or both, or if it's a mix, age is a simple first step into cracking open your audience and their interests. So while kids will listen to you with googly eyes full of wonder, adults may question everything that you tell them, and they might be a little bit more inquisitive. So understanding your age group is a quick first step into picking up interest of your audience. And the second thing, which will also help you build an emotional tie to your audience, is to ask them a few questions. So for kids, like what grade are they in? Or do they know what an ecosystem is? Or for an adult, maybe something along the lines of if they know the impacts of wetlands in their area or how long it takes plastic to degrade. So simple questions can help you gauge how much your audience may or may not know about your subject. And from there, you can take it into your translation. So how will things that I've learned or haven't learned from this group change my presentation to them? On your subject of stereotyping, which is something that we decided we need to talk about and address at this presentation, is that it can be hard to not judge someone by appearance, but people are a lot more complex than they appear at your eyes. So like just looking at their clothes or their skin or the way they walk. And it's important to also not focus on gender pronouns or familiar relations, because that's another thing that you don't necessarily want to assume with who you're talking to. And it can be really challenging to resist the simple urge of just organizing them into a brain bin of like this stereotype or this stereotype. And it's a really easy option. And when you're in a situation that you have to make a quick decision on what interests your audience, it becomes even more difficult to not make the easiest decision on this person that you're talking to. But the easiest way to deduce what you can from a person is to understand their reactions to the first questions that you ask them. So for us, it may be a question of, how is your visit to the zoo been going? Or something similar that builds an emotional connection to your audience. By understanding the simple things such as tone of voice or word choice, you can begin to understand your audience emotions with very little context of their lives. And now back to Skylar.
So at the zoo, how would I go about understanding my audience? Well, beyond what Sarah was talking about and reading the individuals of who you're talking to and understanding how that affects how they retain your message, it's also really important to understand where you are and how that affects your audience. So at the zoo, why do people visit the zoo? Well, one of the biggest reasons why is it's a positive experience. It's a great place to be. It's a happy place. I'm sure Colleen can go off of that. Whenever you're having a bad day in the office, you can always walk outside and it brings you up. It's a good place to be. So it's really important to understand that people are there for that great experience, to see amazing animals that they would never get the chance to see, to learn about these amazing animals, to spend times with their families and friends, and really just to have that good experience. So how does that affect who I'm talking to? Well, for one, that means not everyone's going to want to stop and listen to my sea lion lecture for 45 minutes. So that's something really important to understand, is that I want to be a part of that great experience, and really understanding why they're here and how I can add on to that. So how I can be a part of that great experience. And so that's something that we'll talk about in the next. But I'm going to throw it back to Sarah.
So this is a little activity we would like to try. And so what we're going to do is, with the knowledge that you already have before you entered the webinar and what you've already seen from us, what are some details that you can pick out from this group that would change the way you talk to them? So little things like, what clothes are they wearing, or their age, and things like that. And you can use the chat box to submit your answers, and we'll discuss them as they go.
So really think about reading your audience and really digesting them in a way and trying to absorb all those little things.
And how much time do we have?
I mean, a few minutes. We can talk
Okay.
about it. Face, age.
Cool.
So that is a good thing, Isaac, age. So going back to talking about how, little Johnny in kindergarten is not necessarily going to understand the same thing as dad. So that's a big thing. Lori said face, so that's a good thing. You can read a lot by looking at people's faces, how they're interested, if they're engaged.
Body language, that's a really good thing to understand, is body language. Are they crossing their arms? Are they more open? That's also a good thing to remember when you're presenting information, is to be open with your body.
Yes, Bailey, they look happy. They look happy to be here. Good to hear. So what other things can we kind of pick up? Oh, there's a good one. That's what I was looking for, the camera. So maybe they're invested in being in that place. So photography is a really thing. So if you can find those little things that could open a new chapter of who you're talking to. So the older gentleman has a camera around his neck, so maybe he's interested in photography. So maybe if you are interested in photography, that's a really good way to kind of break down that wall and kind of create a connection with who you're talking to.
Someone put
Stuffed animal.
Yeah, the stuffed animal.
Mm-hmm.
Giraffes, yes, you can talk about giraffes.
Some other things that you could kind of see is, obviously, I don't think these people are strangers. So they're close to each other. So you could see that maybe there's a family dynamic here that you could tap into. So it's just reading all of those things like that.
Mm-hmm.
When you have families, you can often talk about the family of the animal. So Jonah has a family. You can talk about which of the sea lions are his family.
Mm-hmm.
That's a really good idea, Colleen.
Awesome.
I'm acting like I'm actually at the zoo. I'm wait, okay, what time of the day is it? What day of the week? What are we talking? What's the weather? I'm getting into this activity in the chat.
Yeah.
A lot. There's a lot of things that I think we overlook. There's a lot.
Yep. Especially just making small talk with them before you say, hey, well, if you would like to play this game with me or something, it building that emotional connection to them makes them a little bit more open to talking to you, which is a really important thing. All right. So are we ready, or would we like to keep?
Anything else? Let's see if give it like a few more seconds, see if anyone's like try to like speed type something in before we skip. Okay. And if you have anything to add, still type it in. We can always, if we say something good, we can always pop back onto it. But now moving on to that last step, handing it back to Jasmine.
So our last step is translation. When we translate, we plan on how we are going to communicate the information. Translating is a key step in the process because it is how you are executing the information that you are trying. Sorry. It's how you're executing the information that you are trying to give to them. When you translate, you want to make sure that the listener is understanding the information that you are giving them. When things are translated well, you can communicate effectively with many types of people, as we can see in the last activity. Okay. So when we were planning this presentation, we wondered, what could we define translation as? After many conversations, we decided that translation wasn't only one thing. We came up with this diagram that shows that translation can be done in many ways, and we decided on empathy, adaptation, and bridge as subcategories. With these three things, we can somehow connect our message with the listeners.
So our first subcategory that we're going to talk about with translation is empathy. And empathy is really, really important when you're creating your translation because it's the single most helpful way of establishing that connection between your message and your audience. Because empathy allows us to put ourselves in other people's shoes and truly connect us to what we're trying to explain to them. And when that connection is established, it creates the motivation for change in your audience. Empathy is what allows us to perceive the emotions of others, understand the reasoning behind their emotions, and care about what they're feeling. And these pieces of this empathy puzzle create a connection between us and our audience. So similar to what I was mentioning earlier about building that connection with your audience, you can use empathy to create that connection to yourself and your message back to your audience. But why is empathy so important? When you're trying to convince someone of your intent, you use three modes of persuasion. And these three are logos, ethos, and pathos. And logos is logic or fact, and pathos is emotion, and ethos is emotional, ethical connection. So pathos and ethos are a little bit different because it can change your word choice. So when you use pathos, you're trying to engage your audience by targeting their sympathy. But ethos is more focused on telling a story and showing the emotion of your message in your story. While all three of those are really useful in persuasion, you want to focus on empathy to create that connection from, well, for us, to create the connection from animal to human. It's our responsibility to establish the connection through perceiving, understanding, and caring. Empathy is what allows people to change because it shows them a different perspective other than their own. And without seeing, like having a different perspective, there's not going to be any change ever, because why would what their thoughts are on something be wrong? Because it's their thoughts, and that's interpretation. But how do you get people to understand and care about an animal when they can't have a conversation with them? So at the zoo, this is our challenge, and it's our job to tell the stories of the animals to the people so that they can understand that these animals need help and they have the power to help them. And you have to tell the people the story of the animal you're talking about as if it were your own story. And by putting those feelings and emotions into your words, as well as understanding them, the physical change in your message alone can impact and act as a magnet for people's attention, which is super important.
Awesome. So when engaging with guests, one of my biggest goals is to build that connection. So I'm sure you've all probably been counting on your fingers how many times we said the word connection. So connections and building those connections is really the big shiny flare of interpretation. So without using empathy, it's kind of hard to do that. It's kind of hard to create that connection between two different things. And this doesn't necessarily have to be a sea lion and a person. It could be anything. You could be trying to connect someone to a tree, to a river, to an ocean. It doesn't necessarily have to be an animal. But with Jonah at the zoo, like I said, empathy is one of those really important things, and it's kind of one of those things that you need to use to be able to really reach that goal. So one way I could talk about Jonah without using empathy is something like this. So I'm at the zoo. Here we go. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our sea lion exhibit here at the Houston Zoo. We have 5 California sea lions. We have boys and we have girls, ranging from 2 to 23 years old. The oldest sea lion we have, who's also the head of the family group, is Jonah. He varies in size, anywhere from 350 to 500 pounds throughout the year, depending on the season. Our sea lions like to eat food. Their diet consists of heron, capelin, and squid, sometimes ice and ice pops for a treat. So how do you feel? Probably not very connected. That probably didn't really make you want to hop out of bed and go save sea lions in the wild. So that's one way that a lot of us like to talk to people and share information, and it's not wrong. Everything I said was true. It's all correct. You may have learned a little bit about Jonah, or maybe even like, ooh, I like ice pops. He likes ice pops. Like maybe you learned and like made a little bit of a connection there, but it really isn't moving. It's not impactful. So how can I use empathy as a tool when connecting my guests to Jonah at the zoo? Well, let's try that again. Let's clear the scene. Let's start over. So let me try and use empathy. Hi, everyone. Let me introduce you to Jonah. So he's one of the 5 California sea lions we have here at the zoo, and he is rather special. So unlike the rest of his family, Jonah wasn't born in captivity. He was born in the wild. And at a very young age, Jonah was found on the beach of California, alone, separated from his mother, and very underweight. And after beachgoers reported sight of him, marine mammal rehabbers brought him to a nearby facility to heal, but unfortunately, not to heal enough. And thereafter, he was deemed unreleasable due to his health complications. And after spending some time at a nonprofit education facility, Jonah was given a forever home here at the Houston Zoo. And so not only did Jonah get a second chance at life, he also now has a chance to share his story and be an ambassador for his species. So how do you feel now? Probably a little bit more connected. And so by telling that story and kind of building that connection, I'm really describing Jonah as an individual organism, as an individual, not just as another sea lion. So by really telling his story and talking about him more so than just his species, I'm able to really create that connection and that kind of self-motivated passion and drive to make a change within my audience. So by doing just that and really going beyond just the information and facts and statistics, you're really able to create a spark within everyone you're talking to and make them want to go beyond and take action themselves as individuals, which is really amazing. So on to the next.
Okay. So whenever we speak to different types of people, we have to adapt to our audience. When you talk, you can't always stick to the same script, tone, and wording because it might be boring for different types of people. It can change on many factors of your audience. Adaptation can be seen as a way of translating information into what your audience is going to understand. So similar to our other activity, I want to hear how you guys would adapt your message to your audiences of different ages. If you guys could please type in the chat box how you would change what you're saying when you're speaking to kids, teens, young adults, and or elders.
Let's see. So really think about, so we kind of already in that last activity, we defined those different interests of different people and we read them. So now, how would you use that in kind of adapting your message? So how would you change what you're saying?
How would you speak to different different ages? How would you speak to different types of people?
And Lisa said, for little ones, you could sing a song. That's a great way. So obviously, I don't think little kids would want to like sit down at this presentation and this webinar and hear me talk about all these amazing things. So finding things like a song, like a way that kids memorize songs, so they're memorizing that message that you're trying to say, but also enjoying it. So that's really awesome. I love that one.
That is so
Mhm.
For kids, I would tell them more simple facts, and for elders, I would tell them more complicated stories. That's good.
Mhm.
Okay. Kids, fun, exciting. I would engage them in the story. Yep. Kids like to have a lot of fun at the zoo. Yeah, they're always like fun. Okay. Children love fun topics. Poop, ha ha ha. Their eyes glaze over when you throw too much science at them. Yeah, yeah.
So
Okay.
really, like, keeping it to the basics is a really good thing. Let's see. Yeah, older people, you could ask if they've ever worked with seals or sea lions before, if they ever have seen them in the wild. That's a really good way. Especially if you live in an area near with whatever you're talking about. That's a really good one. And something that I'm seeing a lot of people saying is like keeping the more complex stuff to adults. That's a good thing. We have a little saying at the zoo, which is no tragedies below 4th grade. So kind of like understanding the time and the place. And there's certain stories that aren't necessarily best for kids.
Okay, Grace said, teens, ask them questions to help understand the facts. Ask them what they know about the subject in school. That's good whenever you relate back to school to see what they know. And you ask them and they eventually tell you. And so you have an understanding of what they know. Um, Act out or make the sound that the animal makes. Yeah, at the zoo we use puppets a lot.
Lots of good juicy content here. See if anyone else was. I know this one's kind of a hard one to type. It takes a little bit longer. So see if anyone else has anything they want to throw at us.
Bailey said in here, I think you missed this one, to
Ooh.
talk to teens about animals in the wild and conservation and things they can do to be more sustainable. So with
Mhm.
older age groups, you can really focus on that action piece.
Mhm. And it's kind of trendy, being sustainable and like using metal straws, like Disco Girl, like it's trendy. So even like using that sort of appeal to when you're talking to certain people, that's also a really good way to adapt to your audience.
Okay.
Awesome. Okay. If we want to keep going.
Okay, so now we are going to talk about our last subcategory. So that subcategory is bridge. So what does bridge do? A bridge connects two things that would otherwise not be connected, such as two roads separated by a river. So literally like a connection. Okay. Um, when we
So,
use bridges, we are trying to connect the interest of our audience with the interest of our message. By doing this, you make your message not only more appealing, it may also make your audience want to take action. So now
awesome.
handing it over to Skylar.
So like Jasmine said, a bridge is literally a bridge. It's connecting things. So back to Jonah, if I'm wanting someone to take some sort of take action initiative, and like we already talked about in the intent example, for us, it would be inspiring guests to use reusable items instead of single-use plastic ones. I need to be as appealing as possible, like we already talked about, and really setting yourself up for success, and really driving that message to whoever it is you're talking to. So by using that bridge and connecting what I want someone to do with what they want to do themselves, it's a really good way to do just that. And so though people have hundreds of thousands of interests, we're all interested in different things: sports, video games, books, topics, like just a whole bunch of different things. My interest really only has one real, my message really only has one real interest, and that really just being the reduction of plastic consumption. That's my goal. If I can get someone to use one less straw, that's one less straw that could potentially end up in our waterways. So it's really, that's really what it's all about. So how can I connect that to one of the things that I've already figured out about my audience? Well, here's a really easy intent, or a really easy interest that I can gather from, I'd like to think, almost everyone who's here on the webinar right now, and that being health. So I think we're all really thinking about health a lot more these days, considering the fact that we are living through a global pandemic. So it is kind of one of those things that's on our minds a lot. And correlating to health, one of those things really being sanitation. So like, I really find myself whenever I go out in public asking myself, is this clean? Is this safe? Is it safe for me to put my hand here? Has someone maybe been sick and coughed on this doorknob and now I'm grabbing and opening a door? Could I be putting myself at harm? I feel like that's really a question that I think we all ask ourselves a lot more here recently. So how could I bridge that? How could I bridge that interest of wanting to be safe and sanitized with using less plastic? How could I make that connection? Well, one thing I know is one of the more specific things that I think about a lot is fast food workers. So like people handing me, maybe being sick and handing me my food and my utensils and contaminating them maybe. So one thing is if you have a reusable item, you know no one else is touching it. You know no one else potentially sick could cough on your straw. You know there's not potentially a sick fast food worker that could give you something. So by using a reusable item, you can not only keep yourself safe and clean, you can also keep the environment where sea lions live in the wild clean as well. So that's that bridge, bridging those interests of not only are you helping sea lions, you're also helping yourself. So that really is what drives on your message and really makes your audience want to carry that message out. So now that we've kind of gone through the whole process and talked about all these different steps and tools, let's put it all together and let's interpret Jonah's story fully. So, and let's put all of this together, all of these skills and steps, and I'm going to tell you Jonah's story as if I would at the zoo. So hi guys, how are you doing today? I'm assuming you're all doing great, lovely. So let me introduce you to one of my favorite animals at the zoo, Jonah. Isn't he so cute? Look at his face, his eyes are like popping out. He's so cute and chubby. So is it like, look at that face, he's just so cute. And he's a really amazing animal, but he also has a really amazing story. Would you guys like to hear it? I see, I am pretending all of you are shaking your heads, yes. So great. So something that's really unique about Jonah is that he was born in the wild. And you may be asking, well, why is he here if he was born in the wild? Well, it's because he's a very brave, resilient sea lion. So when he was younger, he was found on the beach alone, without his mom, and very hungry. And some really amazing people saw him and brought him to a marine mammal rehab center where they helped him get better, but unfortunately not enough to go back into the wild. So now, afterwards, he has a chance to live here at the zoo. And so we gave him a forever home here. And not only does he get to live out his life here safe, not having to worry about food or predators, he also has a family of his own. He has his 2 girlfriends, Callie and Camilla, and his kids, TJ and Max. So pretty cool story, right? Pretty inspiring. Sometimes I tell myself, if Jonah could do it, I can do it. If Jonah could go through all of that as a sea lion, I can go through my struggles as well. So it's really an interesting story, right? So one way you guys could help sea lions in the wild, like Jonah once was, is by using reusable items. So like metal straws, canvas bags, instead of plastic ones. And so by doing so, you're keeping a lot of trash out of his environment and keeping him safe and all of his counterparts in the wild. But did you know by doing so, you also can keep yourself healthy and safe as well? So by using reusable items, you can keep them as sanitized as you want, clean them as much as you want, and you don't have to worry about other people contaminating them. And so by doing so, you're keeping yourself and sea lions in the wild safe and happy. So thank you guys for chatting with me. I hope you guys have a good day and enjoy the rest of your day at the zoo. Bye. And then scene. So that's kind of what it would look like for us at the zoo interpreting a story. Really using all of those steps. And I know it may look like it was a long process to talk about it all, but really this is something that happens in like 2 to 3 minutes. Like it's not, you are sitting down having tea and breakfast with your audience. It's really something that you really grasp on, and that saying, practice makes perfect, really is very accurate here. So you really only have a few seconds to read your audience, gather your interest, and then translate your message. But as all things, like I said, as all things go, practice makes perfect. So I think this is a good opportunity for us to, if you want to screenshot your screen write down all the steps real quick if you ever want to use this process in the future to translate messages. And with that said, we'd also love to hear what you guys would like to interpret in the future, or if you have interpreted and you guys are interpreters, what type of things you would like to interpret about. So obviously at the zoo, we talk a lot about animals, but you can interpret anything. It doesn't even have to be something physical. So you could interpret like water quality, or maybe a forest or trees. You can interpret a rock if you wanted, but it could be things like as big as history. Like you can interpret the past, art, anything like that, and really to any type of person. So it goes wild. So we'd love to hear what you guys would like to talk about. And so yeah, yay! You all are certified interpreters. Go ahead and print out the certification now. Throw it on your resume. You guys got the skills.
I literally have been clapping, but I forget I'm on mute. So like when you were interpreting and you did the presentation, you finished, have a great day. I'm like, you too, have a beautiful day. Thank you guys so much. That's the end, right? I'm like coming back.
Yes.
Wait.
You're good.
This was the first time I saw their presentation too, for everyone watching. So it was equally a treat for me. But like Skylar said, please screenshot this. I don't know how many times, when I was first starting out and wanting to actually talk about these topics and issues with family members, how many times I was looking for something like this on the internet. Like I was literally Googling how to storytell with emotion / knowledge, and this is it. So definitely please screenshot this. And we'll get into some questions now, but I can't thank you guys enough. That was super special. And I hope everyone has had the chance to think of some really awesome questions. I will put up my little Q&A slide. But while everyone is thinking about questions, so when you guys were talking, the one thing that really struck me about, your presentation, but kind of the different, terms and definitions is, this is what I wish I could do on a daily basis. Like what you all do when you're at the zoo, talking and walking up to complete strangers and asking them to do better by our planet is what I wish I could do every single day. But that's so nerve-wracking, I think, for a lot of us. I mean, it's for me as well, super nerve-wracking, when you're out in public and you see someone who maybe is, about to litter or something. And it's super nerve-wracking, just to go up and talk to them. But you guys do that on a daily basis. You find people in the zoo, go through your steps, go through your process, and hope that they leave the zoo with that one, mission to themselves, or that one next step, that one action challenge. And so I think that's really special. But I guess I want to know, what are some of your favorite memories, or, one instance where you were like, oh man, I think that person's life was just really impacted. What's a really cool story with any of your guests that you've had, or a cool experience that you've had where, they've really got it?
I'll give Jasmine or Sarah the opportunity if they want, because I just talked for like 5 minutes. So if you guys have anything.
It's been a long time. Well, it hasn't been long, but since like I haven't been back to the zoo in a long time, and like my memory's kind of blurry. So I remember, so we have stations at the zoo where we do activities with our guests so they can understand our message. And we have this one specific station about black bears. And so there's like a huge mat with like the map of the United States, and we like show them pictures of the forest and where they think where some black bears belong and stuff like that. And then you have to match it with the clues we give them. And so I remember talking to this little girl, and she was like, oh, so why are there like no trees over here? And I was like, oh, well, people started cutting them down. And I gave her like this like long story explaining to her that people were cutting down trees and it was deforestation and stuff like that. And she was like, oh my God, that's so bad. And so I think she like really took it in, and she was like, oh, okay, so that's bad. We have to recycle paper. We have to like do the best. We have to do better.
Great
I think one of my favorite memories that I have is our sea turtle station, which is a station where we talk about not like plastic bags specifically, and talking about using reusable bags instead of plastic bags. And it's one of my favorite stations because we play the PB or J game, and it's and it's plastic bag or jellyfish, and it's a picture of a plastic bag or a jellyfish like in the ocean, and we show it to them, and they have to figure out if it's a jellyfish or a plastic bag. And when they get it wrong, they're like losing their minds. They're like, oh my gosh, really? Like, I could not tell a difference. And it's like, yeah, well, sea turtles like don't necessarily have like as great vision as we do, and so they also have trouble, and that's why we have to help the sea turtles by reducing our plastic bag use. And it's one of my favorite things.
Yeah, that happens a lot with children and adults, actually. Like, it's amazing how it looks like both.
Yeah, like touching on that, it's one of those fun moments where you really are able to like open up an adult's eyes, and for them to be like, "Ah, that's actually a jellyfish." Like, and like all the kids maybe will be like plastic bag, and the dad in the back will be, it's a jellyfish, and then it's actually a plastic bag, dad. And like being able to be like, what? Like to open that eye on those eyes, and for an activity that's angled towards a younger audience to really like open the eyes of an adult, it's pretty amazing. But I don't have a specific story, mainly because one of my favorite things to do is storytell. And some days I'll come to the zoo and I will storytell all day and talk to thousands of people, and it's kind of hard to remember all the stories. But I do remember this really one interesting couple. She kind of, the girl, kind of hard to explain, but the woman in the couple, she really had a very similar situation to me. So I was 15 at the time. I think they were in their later 20s. And so I gave them my little spiel about the bald eagle exhibit where I was at our Texas wetland exhibit. And after that, really, it's so empowering when you're talking to someone about something, and then when you're done, they're still there and still want to talk to you. That's like how you really know you did your job well. And so we just were talking about life, and they were asking me how old I am, and then talking about my experience here at the zoo. And then she talked about her experience working at a really amazing rehab center. Shout out to TWRC if anyone knows who that is, here in the Houston area. But talking about her experiences, and we were really able to connect as individuals, and not just a guy at the zoo and a guest. We were people talking to each other, and really just like beyond just talking about messages, to like understand that we both have gone down like this path, and that I'm following in her footsteps in the same way, because she is a veterinarian now. And it was just very inspiring to see someone gone through what I'm going through, and kind of like talk me through it. It was just really empowering and interesting. Yeah.
That's super special. Yeah, no, I love those moments. When I was in college, I interned at Shedd Aquarium here in Chicago, and I will never forget, I was not an interpreter, but I was just down on the floor, and someone came up to me and they're like, "I'm really disappointed. I thought this would smell more like Red Lobster." And that was my one interaction with a guest, and trying to talk about, okay, how are they completely different, but I could see how perhaps you might think that. It's not as easy. I'm sure you guys also get kind of wild questions, wild thoughts and statements as well. So I just know that whenever I attend, I appreciate you and always stop to listen. But I think we have some more questions in the chat. If Colleen, you want to read a couple of them.
So this first question is, what gives you hope for the future and what inspires you?
Okay.
I think probably something that always really inspires me is if I'm working with camp kids and we're basically doing the same thing. Like when we're leading them around the zoo, you kind of get to storytell with all of the different animals, and you get to talk to like this specific group, and you get a little bit more attached to them because you're with them all week. And when you give them this story, like at first they have like this kind of childish view about like an animal, like they'll look at a tiger and sometimes they call it a lion, but then like you get them attached to the animals, and by telling them the stories, and you tell them like, how they can help the animals in the wild and what they can do at home or at school. And when they get super, super excited about it, and it just fills my heart with hope for humanity, like it's one of the best feelings.
Yeah, something that I think really inspires me is really just being able to work with all of these amazing people within our program. Colleen has been such an inspiration to me. Just really being able to get off of school every week and come to the zoo on Saturday during the school year, and just to be able to work with all these amazing people. And especially something that I kind of grew up in was kind of an environment, I live in Texas, we're a red state, and there's a lot of people who aren't very environmentally conscious, think sustainability is kind of a taboo thing. It's not really something that people go around preaching about. It's something that's some people even laugh about, think it's funny. And so to be able to see that there are people out there who really do care about this, and that it's an amazing thing to be a part of, and it's really cool. I'm the cool kid. I like, this is amazing. And so it's inspiring to see so many amazing people.
Definitely.
So for me, what gives me hope for the future? So as Sarah was saying, we get to go along with kids from camp. And so whenever you're talking to them and giving them like different stories, they learn about the animals and like conservation and all that stuff. And so you see how like they're thinking differently about things. They're like, oh wow, so this is like true, this is happening in the world. So I think what gives me hope for the future is like that we can change how people think. So as Skylar was saying, our state is red, and so I think that we can change how people think about the environment and different things with communicating in different types of ways and stuff like that. So yeah, changing people's minds and like making them see a different perspective of what's happening.
Awesome. I agree 100%.
Yeah, definitely.
There's one more. I know we're running short on time because my computer took up so much time at the beginning. But one of the questions, and it kind of goes off of my question, is that Marita asks, do you guys have any suggestions for a situation in which the person you're trying to persuade is basically denying everything that you're saying? And that kind of goes with the question I have of, how do you put this into practice? Should they get a picture of Jonah and go through their steps and in home? How do you use these skills that they are learning for the first time, or maybe sharpening during this webinar? How do you use that? How do you practice that in your everyday lives for topics like climate change, like asking your family to cut down on their single-use plastic consumption? How do you have those conversations, and how can the people watching put this into practice too?
That's a really good question. And that's honestly something that I'm still teaching myself about whenever I am interacting with people. It's kind of an ongoing learning process. But they're definitely, the easiest way to say, there's definitely some tough cookies out there. There's some very tough nuts to crack. And sometimes there's just people that you're not always going to be able to get through and get to. But really, it's really just about, so this wasn't me that personally went through this, but it's a thing I always think about that kind of relates to this a little bit, about like that debating. There's always that one person that wants to debate everything you have to say. And I don't remember who it was, but someone was at the ostrich exhibit, and there was this one guest that was literally saying, ostriches are extinct. Ostriches aren't real. And it's kind of, sometimes it's just, there's so much you can do when you have an ostrich in front of you and someone is still trying to tell you it's an extinct species. So sometimes it's just one of those things. I'm pretty sure they were thinking of a dodo bird, but ostrich was what came to mind. But it's just one of those things that you really just have to stay positive and just do what you can. You're not going to be able to get through to everyone, but definitely just trying, and especially like trying to use those interests, that bridge tool of, well, they're denying everything I'm saying, but how can I find, and really just like redirecting the way you're coming at someone, and trying to angle your message a different way. I don't know how helpful that was, probably not very helpful, but you just really have to stay positive, and just try new methods and just do what you can. That would be my advice for sure.
I remember one time I was at our pollinator station and I was teaching this little girl and her dad about monarch butterflies. And monarch butterflies only lay their eggs on milkweed plants. And I was talking about how important it is for us, since Texas is right on that migration pathway for like the specific monarchs that migrate. And I was telling them like, oh, well, planting milkweed around here is really important because like with all of the construction we have here, a lot of the natural milkweed is cut down. And so when we have our chance to garden, it's important to plant these native species that help our native insects and bugs and other pollinators. And I remember the dad, when after I was done talking about milkweed, he was like, oh, well, there's a reason people just don't plant milkweed. And, you know, there are definitely some times that you're going to have those people that you just can't change, especially with adults and in a place that it is a red state, because since conservation is kind of seen as more of a left-leaning topic, it's hard to bring some of these things up. But when you target kids, they can kind of bring the subject into the house, and that's a really nice thing. So like, even if a dad or another adult is a little less open-minded about everything you're saying, bringing the kids into the conversation is really, really helpful because it keeps the conversation in the house. And that's something that's super important. And that's why talking to adults and getting adults to change their perspectives is one of my favorite things, because adults don't necessarily like to change their mind and that's my stereotyping of adults. But from my perspective, I've always had a lot of trouble changing the perspective of adults on certain matters because, you know, like they're obviously older than me. And so they believe they always know better. And it's hard to get them out of their old habits. And it's just really hard to get some people out of, you know, the mindset that they're in. But that's why it's important to use empathy and understanding and telling that story in the best way you can. And, you know, sometimes they just won't understand. And, you know, it's just one of those things you have to live with. Like, I'm one of those people, I know I'm talking a lot. I'm one of those people who's like a people pleaser, and knowing that there's someone in the world who's always going to dislike me does not sit well. But it's something you just have to go on with and hope that the people who are making a change are doing enough to make up for everyone else.
Very true.
Really, do we have time for just one more question?
Yeah, well, we're good.
So first of all, I want to say that I'm inspired just by this person, because they said, this is Lori and Nicolina, who said, I'm 9 and I've gotten my school and restaurants to stop using plastic straws. Congratulations, that is amazing, and that's inspiring. I know that was one of the questions. I totally agree that the next generation is an inspiration to me, because you guys are already doing so much to help protect our planet. But she wants to know if you guys have any advice for putting on a webinar like this. I'm thinking that she's maybe interested in doing something similar to what we're doing. So if you guys want to just give one piece of advice on your process to put this webinar together and help Lori and Nicolina out.
I have a piece of advice. So something that we were doing, I don't know if that static noise is me. It may have been, I don't know. I just heard a random static noise. Something that we had to do when creating this presentation is use interpretation ourselves. So to create a presentation about interpretation, we had to interpret how all of you would interpret what we were telling you. So what that basically means is thinking how people are going to perceive what you're telling them. So we made sure that everything was as visually pleasing, something that was very attention grabbing, and really asking ourselves, if I was someone hopping on this webinar, is this something I would stay on and watch the whole time? And really thinking about that through the entire process is one of the biggest things that we did throughout this whole developmental stage, for sure.
Or Jasmine, do you have any advice for putting together this webinar?
Well, for me, it was very hard. I was like confused most of the time, but Sarah and Skylar helped me a lot. They were like, no, it's like this. It's like this. I'm like, I had to take it in. I was like, okay. I need to like put my head straight. Like, I need to know. You have to know. Okay, hold on. I'm sorry. I'm kind of nervous. So as Skylar said, you have to like think like the people that you're presenting to. You have to think like your audience. Like, what is your audience going to look at? Are they going to be engaged? Are they going to like your presentation and stuff like that? Because it's really important to get their attention. Because a person can only stay focused for around 45 minutes. So you have to like have them engaged, have their attention like most of the time. So yeah, you have to know what your audience wants.
Yeah, definitely. I would say the same thing. Basically, you're interpreting what you think your audience wants and what you think that your audience will want to hear. And I think that's probably the most important thing to remember, because we did a lot of building up a presentation and then scratching it and doing it again, because we weren't sure what people were going to be interested in. And I think that's definitely one of the biggest things, is to remember that. And when you're building a presentation, and just keeping that in mind, because you might be super, super passionate about something. I know I have lots of things that I'm super passionate about that not everyone's passionate about, like planting plants. And it's really important to just like say things that'll keep them interested.
Yeah, and so I wanted to talk about how you're talking to them and like your like script. So whenever we were making our script, we were trying to make it as natural as possible. So it would seem like we were talking to like a person in real life and having a conversation with them. So if you're hosting a webinar, you want them to like feel like you're having a conversation with them, not that you're presenting. Like you are presenting, but you want to make that connection with them. And so having like that natural dialect, that dialogue with them is very important.
Yeah, no, those are all really good pieces of advice. I just was thinking when you all were talking about how Skylar messaged me in March and about this topic, wanting to do and talk about interpretation. And I just was reflecting on how timely of a topic this is right now in the world that we live in. It's a time for tough conversations with family members, with people on the internet, with coworkers about our planet, about our environment, but about our people, the things happening. It's a time full of tough conversations, and I know it can be extremely intimidating. If you have this passion and you have this, thing that you want to share with the world or share with the people in your life that you perhaps are afraid maybe they won't take it as well, or they'll have some sort of a comeback that you won't be prepared for. But I promise you, follow these steps for anything, from having conversations about Black Lives Matter to having conversations about climate change. Use these steps and really meet people where they're at. I know what Sarah was saying. I'm the same way. Like, I'm a huge people person. I want everyone to just think nothing but nice thoughts about myself. And that can be hard when you're kind of in the world of having tough conversations and wanting people to make change. And so I think for myself, I'm going to challenge myself and put it out there that, all right, nope, I'm going to meet people where they're at, find their interests, find what that bridge might be. And I'm going to challenge myself to have, one hard conversation this week. It doesn't even have to be hard, even just one conversation that I want to leave someone with, an action step, that one next thing I want them to do to make our planet and its people, a beautiful, bright, and better place. So I hope everyone watching, I know everyone watching has been equally as inspired as I am. I'm glad I didn't see this beforehand, because I'm like writing notes and I just have all of these things and questions, even though I know we're running out of time. But I did want to quickly put on the screen their contact information. Please, 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 if you're in the Houston Zoo area, if you're not in the Houston Zoo area, please give this group some love. Follow them on social media. Contact, similar to how Skylar contacted me, contact Skylar tomorrow about the webinar, but about different things maybe you were inspired by. I can't thank all 4 of you enough. The work that you do is so unique. And I know I told you guys this during the practice session, but the work that you do is so unique. And this is why we do, have these, is because stories like yours, the way that you storytell is so unique. And I'm just thankful that you were able to share that with everyone today. The other thing I want to tell everyone quickly is, if you see that little QR code in the left-hand side, if you don't know how QR codes work, they're kind of weird, but if you have your phone, just go up to it like this and take a picture, and it'll send you to the World Oceans Day website, where if you're interested in taking action today, I know it seems kind of overwhelming sometimes, like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do right now? I'm feeling so energized and fueled. What should I do? Click that petition and sign the Campaign for Nature 30 by 30 petition. It seems rather small, but we need to urge our world leaders to protect at the very least, 30% of our planet by 2030. It's what we collectively, it's super simple, but it's what we collectively need to do, no matter where you're at on this planet. So we can continue to love and cherish these special animals in the wild, for sure, but in the Houston Zoo as well. But I can't thank all 4 of you enough. Please give them some love on social media. Please reach out if you have any questions. Thank you to everyone who is watching. Thank you to everyone who's watching this as a recording. We're with you as well. But I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your Wednesday, and do what you can, with the time that you have. I promise no action is too small to make a difference. So thank you guys so much.
Thank you. Yay.
Yay!
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Bye.